We all know that it is a time-honored tradition for MAGA Republicans and Trump stooges to appear on the Sunday shows debasing themselves in defense of Donald Trump's latest idiotic action, but usually they have a little time to prep. Scott Bessent this morning, he didn't, because Donald Trump, in the middle of his interview, made an insane post that he had to respond to, and his response was to call Donald Trump a liar. Yes, Donald Trump started tweeting about his tariffs, and Scott Bessent, well, he didn't agree with what he had to say. We are going to get into it all and how Bessent melted down on air after Trump's post. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into what Bessent had to say, calling Donald Trump a liar as he imploded on air, we have to start with why Donald Trump is so angry about his tariffs, and that's what's happening in the Supreme Court right now that Lawrence O'Donnell broke down here.
In the United States Supreme Court this morning, Donald Trump was humiliated again when the Supreme Court, including the justices who Donald Trump appointed, ripped apart the biggest and stupidest policy lie of the Trump second term. At 11:22 a.m., when Neil Katyal rose to address the Supreme Court, the first sentence he spoke contained only 3 words: tariffs are taxes. And there it was, the pure economic truth and policy truth about tariffs that the founders of this government knew and that every president has known and every member of Congress has known until Donald Trump started lying about tariffs. The Trump tariff enforcers were seated in the front row at the Supreme Court today. Why? To try to intimidate the Supreme Court? The always goofy Howard Lutnick, the most incompetent Commerce Secretary in history, who is always the loudest laugh at every Trump joke, was there in the front row, bringing into the room a mind smaller than the smallest mind on the Supreme Court, and sitting beside him was the Secretary of the Treasury. In our lifetimes, the Secretary of the Treasury has never attended a Supreme Court hearing. The last Secretary of the Treasury known to have attended a Supreme Court hearing was the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. But that was in 1796. Hamilton attended a Supreme Court hearing only when he was a former Secretary of the Treasury, the year that he attended that hearing. And so it is entirely possible that no currently serving Secretary of the Treasury has ever attended a Supreme Court hearing until the relentlessly ineffectual Scott Bessent, who appears to believe that the most important thing about being a Treasury Secretary is dressing the part, while being willing to say the most ridiculously false things ever said about tariffs by a Treasury Secretary. Donald Trump himself had been threatening to attend the Supreme Court hearing, presumably as some kind of intimidation tactic. But he chose in the end to send his completely unintimidating court jesters instead. Donald Trump's lawyer, arguing in favor of his illegal and unconstitutional tariffs today, had a much more difficult time than the Trump tariff enablers do when they appear in very friendly TV interviews that they submit to. The Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary have an open invitation to come on this program and discuss tariffs for the full hour or any amount of time that they choose. But they haven't shown up. Today, they had to sit there silently when Neil Katyal said tariffs are taxes. And they had to sit there silently for all 2 hours and 40 minutes in which Donald Trump's lawyer never said that tariffs are not taxes. He didn't try to make that impossible point.
These tariffs are not only idiotic, they're not only incredibly damaging to our economy, but they are obviously illegal. But Donald Trump has decided that he's going to make it the centerpiece of his entire economic agenda, an agenda which is to hurt working class people and make life more unaffordable. It hasn't really turned out all too well, considering that Trump acknowledged after Election Day that it was affordability, the issue that he lost on, only to then decide that it's the media's fault. Yes, that was the pivot from Trump. Maybe not let's stop screwing people over and depriving them of food assistance. Instead, how about I attack Fox for not being enough of a propaganda outlet? Now that's not working out for Trump, and so he has a new plan for his tariffs and how he's going to bring people back. He posted about it this morning, and then Scott Bessent immediately stabbed him in the back. Trump wrote on Truth Social, "People that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation and a record stock market price." Trump went on to say that because of his tariffs, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everybody.
His main argument, though, seems to be that it's about taking in the revenue, and he also promised this morning
No,
a
George,
dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people. How is he going to pay that dividend of $2,000 a person?
It's not about taking in the revenue; it's about rebalancing. And the revenue occurs early on, and then as we rebalance and the jobs come home, then it becomes domestic tax revenue.
Are you worried that the president's focus on revenue, though, which is what he's been focusing on in his public statements, is going to hurt your argument at the Supreme Court?
Not at all. It's completely consistent that the revenues come in at the beginning, then as we rebalance, which is the goal of this, bring back high-paid manufacturing jobs to the U.S., then it will then morph into domestic tax revenues. You know, President Trump has consistently fought for the American worker, and we are seeing trillions of investments in the U.S. that would not have occurred without the tariffs. The other thing, too, is the authority that he uses is called IEPA. It is an emergency authority, and he used that emergency authority. He got the Chinese to the table to negotiate on stopping the precursors for fentanyl drugs. If fentanyl, hundreds of thousands of Americans dying every year, is not an emergency, what is? On October 8th, Chinese threatened to put export controls on rare earth materials. He was able to threaten 100% tariffs, and we were able to negotiate that away. And then finally, in terms of the general tariffs, we are doing these trade deals that would not be possible. We were at a tipping point in terms of the economy, in terms of our trade balance, and we are rebalancing successfully.
Do you have a formal proposal to give a $2,000 dividend to every American?
I haven't spoken to the president about this yet, but it could. The $2,000 dividend could come in lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans. So, those are substantial deductions that, are being financed in the tax bill.
You can see the wheels turning in Scott Bessent's head as he's like, yeah, we're not sending you $2,000 cash. And this is especially damaging to Donald Trump because he talked so much about all the waste in government that Elon Musk was going to cut. And that, of course, didn't go too well for either Elon or Donald Trump. And people were expecting, because Trump teed it up, maybe a Doge check would be coming. Do you remember those days, the Doge check days, where Donald Trump and Elon were saying that they were going to send people $5,000? Everyone in the country was getting $5,000. Well, now Donald Trump is recognizing that people's economic conditions are suffering because of his economic policy. And so what's his answer? Promise people money. Now, this did work in Donald Trump's first administration when he was responding to a once-in-a-generation pandemic. And a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 did so, and this is well reported, because they thought they might get another stimulus check. They believe they did well under Donald Trump's economy, which of course he upended, because they were sent a stimulus check, one that he put his name on. Now, Joe Biden did not put his name on his stimulus check. He absolutely should have. That was a tremendous mistake, and one that we should learn from. The Democrats need to tout our accomplishments as much as possible, because as we remember with the infrastructure bill, when we don't, the Republicans who voted against them take credit for them. So we always have to be remembering that going forward. It's also why it's important to build independent progressive media that can message the successes that Democrats have. Well, MAGA is constantly pushing their propaganda, but there is no dividend coming. That is what Bessent made clear. There is no dividend. It's not coming. It's not happening. Donald Trump isn't going to send you money. Donald Trump isn't going to save you. Donald Trump is actually doing the opposite right now. Not only having courts block SNAP recipients from receiving their funds. But any Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Wes Moore, who are trying to pay them out from the federal, not the federal budget, but the state budget, he is attacking them and says he will go after those states financially if they provide people SNAP benefits. That is insane. And it is why we saw Governor Wes Moore respond this morning in a clip you're going to want to check out.
We're joined now by the Democratic governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. Good to have you here in person.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
So, Governor, 1 in 8 Americans use food stamps in Maryland. You have about 700,000 people, as I understand it, who rely on this for food aid. Since the Supreme Court put that stay in place on Friday, do you know whether that money will actually be available to residents in your state to buy food?
We don't know, and that's why we're not waiting. It is why, just in the past few days, I have authorized over $10 million that's going towards heating assistance for people in the state of Maryland. Over $10 million has gone to our Maryland food banks, that we have made public transportation free for all of our federal workers because they, in many cases, are going to work and not being paid. Mm-hmm. And I have also authorized $62 million to go towards SNAP to make sure that SNAP is not going to be interrupted for the people of Maryland for as long as we can, despite the fact that we are waiting for the President of the United States to finally do his job. We are watching the President who is literally breaking the law so people can starve. But we're not going to sit there and tolerate it in our state.
Well, you just heard Director Hassett say that they are trying to follow the law, which is why they went to the courts. The USDA did say they were going to work towards implementing full payments, and then there was this Supreme Court stay put in place. So do you have clarity on when money might be coming through at all? Like, what's the federal government telling you?
There is no clarity at all. In the past 6 days, we've received 4 different measures of guidance from the USDA and from the Trump administration about how to handle it, where initially it was said, well, listen, we want the states to help to support. And despite the fact that this program was built as a partnership between the federal government and the states, where the federal government were really helping to underwrite these costs for people. And then once we decided to step up and say we are going to make sure that our people are going to be okay.
You were fronting the money.
That we are going to front the money.
Okay.
We've now received guidance saying the states are going to be punished for fronting the money. There is a chaos, and it is an intentional chaos that we are seeing from this administration, and where they have money for everything. They got money to fight wars. They got money for ballrooms. They got money for everything. But when it comes to supporting the American people, that's now when they are crying, well, we're broke, and that's not what the law requires us to do.
We need more governors fighting like Wes Moore, and we need all governors to get on board with some redistricting. This is a fight for democracy. This is a fight against Donald Trump rigging our midterms, and we got to be in it. It can't just be Gavin Newsom. Everyone's got to get on board. We're going to keep talking about that on this show. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.